They set out not knowing if the land would ever end, or if they would survive the journey. The expedition that changed America's map was led by two men who had never seen most of what lay ahead. And the success of one of the greatest explorations in history depended on people history almost forgot. In 1803, the United States was still a young and uncertain nation. Its borders ended at the Mississippi River, and everything beyond was largely unknown to Americans. European powers had claimed the land for centuries, but accurate maps were rare, and reliable knowledge was limited. For President Thomas Jefferson, this ignorance was a threat. A nation could not defend or govern what it did not understand. That same year, the Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of the United States almost overnight. With a single agreement, America acquired millions of square miles stretching toward the Pacific Ocean. But ownership on paper meant little without knowledge on the ground. Jefferson needed answers about rivers, mountains, native nations, trade routes, and whether a water passage to the Pacific truly existed. To find those answers, he turned to his private secretary, Meriwether Lewis. Lewis was young, disciplined, and deeply curious. Jefferson trusted him completely. Before the journey began, Lewis trained intensively, studying botany, astronomy, medicine, navigation, and cartography. This was not just an expedition, it was a scientific mission meant to place the United States among the great exploring nations of the world. Lewis chose William Clark as his co-leader. Clark was an experienced frontiersman and military officer, known for his practical skills and leadership. Though Clark technically held a lower rank, the two men agreed to lead as equals, an unusual decision that helped hold the group together during moments of extreme pressure. The Corps of Discovery officially departed in May 1804, traveling up the Missouri River from present-day Illinois. The expedition included soldiers, hunters, boatmen, and interpreters, about 45 men in total at its peak. Their instructions were precise: document the land, map the rivers, record plants and animals, establish diplomatic relations with native tribes, and assert American presence without provoking conflict. Almost immediately, the journey tested them. The Missouri River was powerful and unpredictable. Mosquitoes swarmed relentlessly. Supplies spoiled. Accidents were constant. One man, Sergeant Charles Floyd, died early in the expedition, likely from a ruptured appendix, the only death during the entire journey. As they moved deeper into the continent, the world changed around them. Vast plains replaced forests. Wildlife appeared in numbers few Americans had ever imagined. Lewis and Clark recorded species unknown to science: prairie dogs, grizzly bears, and towering herds of bison. But the expedition did not travel through empty land. They encountered dozens of Native American nations, each with its own politics, alliances, and interests. Diplomacy became as important as navigation. Gifts were exchanged. Councils were held. Promises were made, some that the United States would later fail to keep. One of the expedition's most critical moments came with the arrival of Sacagawea, a Shoshone woman who had been captured as a child and later married to a French trader. Sacagawea joined the expedition as an interpreter. Traveling with an infant on her back, she became a symbol of peace to the tribes they encountered and proved invaluable in negotiations. Her knowledge of the land, languages, and survival skills repeatedly saved the expedition. When supplies were lost, she recovered them. When food was scarce, she found edible plants. When the expedition needed horses to cross the Rocky Mountains, her presence helped persuade the Shoshone, her own people, to assist. Crossing the Rockies was the most brutal phase of the journey. The mountains were far taller and more treacherous than expected. Snow, hunger, and exhaustion pushed the Corps to the brink of collapse. At times, the men survived on candles and scraps of meat. There was no triumph in this moment, only endurance. Against overwhelming odds, they emerged on the western side of the continent and followed the Columbia River to the Pacific Ocean. In November 1805, they finally reached the coast. The long-sought Northwest Passage did not exist, but the journey itself had achieved something far greater. The expedition spent a harsh winter near the Pacific, building Fort Clatsop and waiting out storms. For the first time, the group voted together on major decisions, including Sacagawea and an enslaved man named York, Clark's servant. It was a rare moment of inclusion in an era defined by exclusion. In the spring of 1806, the Corps began the return journey east. They traveled faster this time, guided by experience and knowledge gained at immense cost. By September, Lewis and Clark returned to St. Louis, alive, successful, and carrying information that would reshape the nation. They brought back detailed maps, scientific observations, and intelligence about native nations and geography. The United States now understood its western lands better than any European power. Trade routes expanded. Settlers followed. Expansion accelerated. But the expedition's success also carried consequences. The information Lewis and Clark gathered opened the door to westward settlement that would displace native nations on a massive scale. What began as exploration would later become conquest. Meriwether Lewis struggled after the journey, burdened by financial troubles and declining mental health. He died in 1809 under mysterious circumstances. William Clark went on to serve as a territorial governor and federal official, overseeing policies that often harmed the very native nations the expedition had once relied upon. The Lewis and Clark expedition stands as one of the most remarkable journeys in American history, not because it was flawless, but because it revealed the nation's potential and its contradictions at the same time. It was a story of courage, cooperation, curiosity, and survival. It was also the beginning of a transformation that would change a continent forever. The journey west did not simply map the land, it mapped the future of the United States, with all its promise and all its cost. In the years that followed, the echoes of the expedition spread far beyond the journals Lewis and Clark carried home. Their maps became the foundation for American expansion. Fur traders moved first, following the rivers the Corps had traced. Then missionaries arrived, and after them settlers, families with wagons, dreams, and little understanding of the lands they were entering. Trails hardened into routes, routes into roads, and roads into borders that reshaped the continent. For Native American nations, the legacy was far more complex. Some tribes initially saw opportunity in trade with the United States, believing cooperation might preserve their autonomy. Others recognized the danger immediately. The expedition had marked not just rivers and mountains, but villages, resources, and strategic ground. Knowledge that once protected native communities now made them vulnerable. Government policy soon followed exploration. Treaties, often coerced or broken, forced tribes from ancestral lands. Reservations replaced homelands. The peaceful councils Lewis and Clark recorded became distant memories as military force took their place. The expedition that relied so deeply on native guidance would later be used to justify their displacement. Scientific impact endured as well. The detailed observations of plants, animals, climate, and geography transformed American science. Species once dismissed as rumor were now documented fact. The idea that the American West was a harsh, empty wilderness gave way to an understanding of its richness and diversity. Sacagawea's role, long minimized, gradually gained recognition. Once a footnote in official reports, she became a symbol of resilience, intelligence, and the often uncredited contributions of indigenous people and women to American history. Her story reminded later generations that exploration was never the achievement of one group alone. The expedition also reshaped how Americans saw themselves. It fed the belief that the nation was destined to expand, to cross mountains, to reach oceans. This belief, later called manifest destiny, would define American identity throughout the 19th century, for better and for worse. Yet when stripped of myth, the Lewis and Clark expedition remains profoundly human. It was men cold, hungry, afraid, and uncertain, choosing cooperation over conflict more often than violence. It was survival built on shared knowledge. It was ambition tempered by reality. 2 centuries later, their journey still matters not because it discovered a land that already existed, but because it revealed how power, curiosity, and consequence are forever linked. Exploration opened doors, but it also set events in motion that could not be undone. The Corps of Discovery did more than reach the Pacific. It marked the moment the United States truly turned westward, stepping into a future that would define its history and leave questions that still echo today. And when the Corps of Discovery finally dissolved, there were no parades waiting for most of its members. No monuments. No certainty that what they had done would matter. They returned to farms, frontier posts, and quiet lives, carrying memories no one else could fully understand. Meriwether Lewis never escaped those memories. Struggling with depression and debt, he died just 3 years later under mysterious circumstances, a tragic reminder of the personal cost behind national achievement. William Clark lived longer, becoming a governor and federal official, helping shape the very policies that would transform the West they once explored together. The nation they helped change grew rapidly. Within decades, railroads cut across the plains, states rose where wilderness once stood, and the Pacific became not a distant dream but a destination. Yet alongside growth came loss, cultures uprooted, ecosystems altered, promises broken. Today, the Lewis and Clark expedition stands as both triumph and warning. It represents the power of curiosity and cooperation, but also the unintended consequences of expansion. Its success depended on indigenous knowledge, yet its legacy contributed to indigenous suffering. It mapped a continent, but it also paved the way for conquest. History does not offer simple verdicts. The expedition was neither purely heroic nor purely destructive. It was a turning point, a moment when exploration became destiny, and destiny reshaped millions of lives. Standing at the edge of the Pacific, Lewis and Clark believed they had reached the end of their journey. In truth, they had only begun a story far larger than themselves, a story of a nation moving west, learning, failing, building, and still reckoning with the path it chose. That is the enduring legacy of the Lewis and Clark expedition, not just where it went, but what followed after, and what those choices continue to mean today.